and welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted to have a conversation with Alex Thomson. Alex, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Fritz.
Alex, I'm going to briefly introduce you to our audience. You are in commercial real estate. You're a commercial real estate executive. You've been doing that for over 20 years, both in Canada and the US. And you're the first Canadian to chair the Commercial Real Estate Development Association with over 21,000 members. And personally, you've been involved in over 2 billion worth of transformative commercial real estate projects. So that is a lot to talk about, but it's all going to be around commercial real estate because that's your passion.
Yes, excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Quick question. I'm going to first start off with a definition.
Yes.
What is commercial real estate?
Yeah, that's a great place to start because people often have such a narrow view of what the industry is. In fact, I would say even an impediment to people getting more engaged with the industry is that they think immediately, if I say I'm in commercial real estate, they say, oh, you're a realtor, like a
Yeah.
residential house agent. But actually, the commercial real estate sector is a very broad sector. There's people like me who work in the development of new buildings and new properties. There's owners, there's architects, and there's even specialist lawyers and other people who've chosen to focus in on commercial real estate. And for those listening and watching, I'd say a useful way to think of it is if a property is being used by a company or business and collecting rent, or even apartment buildings, those are all considered commercial real estate, where the user of the space is either paying rent or operating out of that space, as distinct from residential, where it's your home and you're living in it.
Okay. Are there other, let's say, type of buildings which you haven't covered yet, which also exist?
Yeah,
Of government
because
buildings, or is that commercial real estate?
yeah, because commercial real estate sort of moves with the economy. 20 years ago, when I came to Canada and started working, there's categories that didn't even exist. Data centers may be the most obvious one, but also, there's a big move. Particularly the US was a leader in this area, what they called life sciences, so purpose-built laboratory research buildings created for the medical
Mm.
sector, and that was a big growth area over the last several years. So the sort of the big steady categories over a long time have been office, retail, and industrial. And gradually that's been added to, as I say, data centers, apartment buildings, life sciences. And there are specialist categories, like the retail space in an airport terminal and stuff. But that's just goes to show how commercial real estate permeates through the whole economy.
Okay, got it. Now, you mentioned yourself, you moved to Canada 20 years ago. I'm picking up a British accent. Let's,
Yeah, so I originally grew up in Scotland, and I did my degree in commercial real estate in Scotland. And then after that, I did sort of everything except commercial real estate for a few years, traveled, did different stuff, and then decided, okay, time to figure out what I actually want to do in a more enduring way. And that brought me back to commercial real estate. And the last 20 years in Canada, with some exposure to what's going on in the US too, that's kind of been the bread and butter of my career.
okay. Now, at a young age, if you're going to study commercial real estate, what attracted you? What was appealing about commercial real estate? You said, okay, I'm actually going to study this.
Yeah, so this is kind of a funny story. I often say to people, if I'd known that the job I wanted was called Certified Mountain Guide, I'd never worked in an office in my entire life.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to go about doing that, and I tried asking teachers and other educators, okay, how do I get to do that? And they basically were trying to get me to be a PE teacher, and I knew I didn't want to be a PE teacher. I wanted to guide people climbing, and then realized nobody knew what that looked like, and neither did I. And so I bumped into commercial real estate really because I thought, well, this will have three things that were important to me and that have continued to be important to me. One was the variety. the challenge each day is different. Second of all, that you get to deal with people. I just enjoy that. I like the fact that it's quite a relationship-driven job. And last of all, I like the combination of something tangible. I get to go out on site, I get to see what we're actually building and participate in that process. And I find that continues to be stimulating in a way that, for me and with my personality, I don't think I would have found that same stimulation in other fields.
Okay, well, it'd be interesting to hear if from the viewers what other fields might have that. But then again, I see what you're getting at in what you're doing. Um, who triggers commercial real estate, or is that economy dependent?
I would say that someone put it quite well a long time ago, which is that commercial real estate houses people and jobs. And so that tends to be the genesis of all of this. And somewhere back a very, very long time ago, somebody figured out that they could derive an income and an investment by creating a space that other people wanted to use and then leasing it to them. And so that's sort of the core framework, is that you've got this environment that people wish to use, and somebody owns it in order to derive an investment income. And so we exist in the same sort of space as other types of alternative investments. So once you get past stocks and bonds and you're into infrastructure investment or what have you, commercial real estate has come up, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that that we could get into if we wished. But that's the basic premise, that we're housing people and jobs, and the folks that need space to operate and work are willing to pay for the ability to do that.
Okay, got it. Now, do you have a say? Do you want to say what's actually happening in the commercial real estate?
I think that in every field, the people that are aspiring to have impact want to have some influence over how their field develops and grows. One of the things that we do with the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, with NAIA, is we have a Developer of the Year award program. And if the audience was to go and have a look at some of the groups that have won Developer of the Year over the last number of years, they've been innovative. They've tended to look at how they can take existing platforms and enhance them. And I think that the people that are really driving where the business goes have that vision, and they're anticipating where business is wanting to go and responding
Okay.
uh, with projects.
Well, the way you describe it, I can imagine that you have a role to play when you see big buildings being refurbished as from an office space to small apartments or to like a startup factory. So you have influence on a type of um, use of the building and also a type of even business model being created. If you look at the whole startup scene, so
Yes.
is that something you actively try to develop? So you have a way you could say buildings are used.
Yeah, that's such a good question, Fritz. And I would say it does differ a little bit sector by sector. So maybe we'll start as an example with retail.
Mhm.
Retail truly is bringing together a community of the retailers thrive one to another, and that's been true. We can go back and even look at built form in the Roman era, that it was that congregation of users coming together in the market into the public space. Um, and so to this day, really, retail developers are trying to collaborate with the retailers to create what we call a tenant mix, the right organization or bringing together of those folks into a community that works. And people may not think of it that way as easily if they imagine, say, a big retail shopping mall. But actually, even in the mall where it's big tenants, global tenants, the same thing is occurring. There's a bringing together of people with like purpose. Uh, so that's really key in the retail space. With office, as you've mentioned, we've seen such an evolution in the last 10 years, I would argue, on office, even before COVID. COVID just put a spotlight on it. But the way that we all work is so different. And for the commercial real estate person, one of the challenges is that we're supposed to create a 50-year building or a 100-year building or longer. We're signing 10-year leases, often with extension clauses. And yet, just think of how different the way that you live your life and the way I live my life is in just the last 10 years. So trying to anticipate that makes the field interesting.
Yeah. Do you within your association, I'll come to the association running that a little bit later, but have discussions like I live in a relatively small town just outside of Amsterdam, and I see quite a number of shops closing down because they realize the mom and pop shops just cannot compete with online. Uh,
Yes.
is this just a given, or can you do something from your perspective to try to change what's happening
Hmm.
or influence at least?
That combination or collaboration between a landlord and a tenant, I think, is what allows the best developers and the best buildings to be successful over a long period. You know, I don't think I'm all that old. And when I started my career, um, in the UK, as an example, it was still common to try to make office tenants sign a 25-year lease. The world just couldn't possibly function like that now.
Yeah.
And so, one of the projects that I led a number of years ago, we won Best Shopping Centre North America at the International Property Awards. One of the things that the judges liked was that we purposely looked and said, we could see even back then, 2012 or whatever it was, that the economy was increasingly going to shift online. Now, the majority of sales in Canada are still done in person, but we could see the change. And so we thought, well, we have to create an experience where people want to spend time at the center. If we give them an excuse to go back to their car and go home, they will. And so creating a positive place where people wanted to come out and live their lives and where the center was part of the community, that was really crucial. And I think that to your question, um, that's important. I also will say that part of the shift that's gone on in the world has made it hard for mom and pops, and that's not specifically because of the approach of the landlords. In my view, I think that each of us as a consumer probably has to think a bit about that
Oh yeah,
local
yeah,
commitment. Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, setting up a space in a way that allows your tenants to thrive and that helps your space to
Yeah.
stay relevant, that's crucial.
Okay, so what I'm thinking of, what I my own experience is wondering if your association has a role to play there. If I look at in Europe where I live, when you tell someone I'm going to the city center, then you know that's where the bars and the restaurants are, so where the nightlife is. That's where people come together and socialize. If
Mm,
you would make the same statement, and I made that statement once in Houston years and years ago, oh, I'm going to the city center in the weekend, they would look a little bit awkward. I mean, what are you going to do? There's nothing to do there. And then you realize
mm,
the city center is a commercial uh, part of town where nothing happens. And oh yeah, that's when you go to the script. It's when you go to Westheimer. So, and it's also, which also doesn't help, a car-centric
mm,
community. So,
mm.
as a commercial real estate center, do you play a role in not only looking at the building, but the designing, developing livable cities for now and in the near future?
Yeah, definitely. So, excuse me. So, one of the things that NAIOP chose to do a number of years ago was to create a research foundation. And that was seeded by people from within the industry, developers and owners, who chose to invest money into this and say, we need to be able to understand what best practices are look like. We need to know what's shaping things. And a key part, even of my role this year, has been visiting municipalities. And talking with the leaders and community leaders also to chat about how effective policy and collaboration can work. What I've noticed, maybe you mentioned already, I grew up in Europe, so maybe this is a bit of a thing I particularly am sensitive to, but when I moved here, planners would go over to some city, Copenhagen as an example, and say, this is how it is in Copenhagen. And then they bring it back
Yeah.
to North America. And I always want to say, but you do know that 900 years ago, they didn't design the city that way because they wanted it to be walkable. There was no other option except it was walkable. And now the city built that way. There's a different set of skills and thought processes that are necessary to take cities through evolution. And downtown revitalization is an interesting example, and NAIOP's been pretty active in this in the last couple of years. Calgary, as an example, here in Canada, is a city where they've had an especially successful program of the city with the development community, with the wider population, working to actively repurpose office into residential.
Yeah. Good.
But it was
And
the three
yeah.
legs of that stool
Yeah.
together that let that happen. If planners try to impose it or developers try to make it happen, it doesn't work. It needs to be organic.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking of the Big Dig in Boston, where they put all the highways underground, and they created a much more livable city that way, which
Hmm.
was enforced by a local city government. Said, "No, we need to save our city, and this is the way we're going to do it."
You know, I think that if we flew around North America, and North America maybe is the easiest one for me to talk about because this is where I spend my day to day.
Yeah.
There are examples where um, catalytic policy making has enabled things to happen. And there's an awful lot of examples uh, where nothing occurred. Where I live in Edmonton, as an example, they've we've had initiatives, say like bonus density, and for the audience, that's a program where the planners will say, we'll allow you to build a certain amount of building on that site, but if you add residential, we'll let you build more without having to come back and ask for permission. That program has actually existed here for a long time. But the combination of organic circumstances to let that policy thrive haven't been there. And so we haven't seen the level of downtown population that the planners would like to accomplish. Equally, I've seen examples where some developers and owners have allowed their properties to, I don't know, just sort of exist. And the best people aren't doing that. And part of our role as an association is to inspire our members, um, to inspire the community, to inspire municipalities to think collectively, how can we make sure that the places where we live and the buildings that exist in that area inspire us and relate to what we want and move with us as our society changes?
Okay. Now, just out of curiosity, you told me how you got into commercial real estate. Does you could say chairing the association still allows you, the same, I would say, benefits you're looking for, or has the characteristics changed?
Hmm. Well, there's almost two pieces to that, so maybe I'll try to approach them that way. I would say that as chair, I get a lot of what I was initially drawn into. I get to see all kinds of different markets. So far this year, I've been on 44 different flights. I've been in all kinds of different markets, and I get to meet all manner of interesting people, folks that are municipal leaders who are trying to drive change in their community, developers who are doing innovative and new projects, even some of those real um, iconic projects that we would all know just from the news, never mind from our day-to-day life. So that aspect, being the chair, has been tremendously enjoyable to me, and it's really encouraged me again to look for what's that next level in my career.
Okay. And
Um, go ahead, Chris.
sorry, no, just Alex, just wondering, what are the most exciting trends or concrete developments you're seeing at the moment?
Good question. I would say um, the developments that I see that I get the most out of are where there's a bringing together of different user types into one space, and so there's a little bit of a village feel,
Mhm.
even if it's an urban village. There's that village feel. If there's some residents there, there's office there, there's an appropriate amount of retail that's supporting what otherwise is going on. I think that developers in a lot of cases are choosing, and again, I'm talking about the best developers here, the people that the rest of us are going to end up looking to. They're intentionally thinking, what kind of who's going to live in this building and what retailer is going to inspire the person that I want to live in that building to move to the building. And so they don't see, over here, I've got my residential program, over here, I've got my retail program. They're thinking, if Fritz and Alex are going to live in that building, how do I make them feel excited about that building? How do I bring that office tenant here? And so you see that drawing together to really create community. That's what I find the most exciting.
Okay, it's good to hear, by the way. Now, you already alluded to role models.
Hmm.
What are who and what is a typical role model in commercial real estate?
Good question. Maybe I'll suggest two things. I would say that people coming into the industry are sometimes distracted by role models that I think they misunderstand. Um, Sometimes people are coming into the industry because they've heard a story somewhere that you can make a big bag of money, and they have this idea that it's flashy and you can come in and do things quickly, and then all of a sudden you're going to be important. And actually, we're going through a process right now of highlighting some local leaders through NAIOP and sharing what's allowed them to be successful. And all of them talk about an enduring attitude of uh, commitment to what they're doing, passion, uh, thinking 5, 10, 15 years out, and not the short term attitude that can sometimes crop up when people think about business generally. I would say that's often a challenge, but real estate particularly, we seem to um, struggle sometimes with people coming in thinking, I'm going to do this and make a bag of money. And the best projects have a much deeper purpose than that.
It's good to know that. I almost want to blurt it out. Okay, I am blurting out. You have to have a conscience to do this work. You need to
Mhm.
long term. So how would you then define success? How do you find your own success?
Yeah, great question. For me, I've always wanted to feel that I've made a positive impact.
Mm.
And so part of the reason I even chose to be the chair is when I joined NAIOP back in late, I suppose it was 2014, 13, somewhere around there. There was quite a difference between the experience that the Canadian members got and the experience that the US members got. And I dare say that members in smaller cities in the US might have thought the same sort of thing, that there's a difference in experience. As a Canadian, I thought, we're doing good projects here. We need and will benefit from seeing what best in class looks like on a continental scale so that we're inspired and challenged by what's really great as opposed to what we can see close to us. And so that aspect of wanting to have an impact and do something that would be enduring through its quality and through a determination of excellence. That's been so key in my life, and that's what's allowed me to still feel passionate and excited day in, day out doing similar things. And I would assume actually a lot of our audience and maybe many of your previous guests would say that it really does start with passion and having some vision beyond just a temporary or a one-time win.
Okay, good. Now, following question about the association. I just mentioned 21,000 members.
Hmm.
Can you put a number on or a percentage of is have you reached like the 90% of all the potential members, or is it just a fraction what's out there? Do you have an idea what your potential is, and are you a growing, healthy association?
We're definitely growing, and I'm confident that we're healthy. I would say one of the reasons I'm confident that we're healthy is we're getting better and better each year at listening. Even as we've grown, I think we're getting better and better at listening to our members, what's motivating and challenging them, and then looking at how we can together meet those needs. My theme this year was one knee up. We're better together, and so also giving people that sense of personal ownership. If you're a NAIOP member, it's your association, it's your chance to speak up. So I do think that we're healthy. For us in particular, there's an emphasis on the development portion of the commercial real estate business. And so I don't know what our maximum potential membership is, but I would say that we're purposeful in making sure that we continue to put an attention and focus on those who are looking at development and the creation of the built environment, because otherwise commercial real estate is so broad. Say in Scotland, you can be an inch deep and a mile wide, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to serve a purpose.
Okay. Now, how long do you expect to stay in this role?
Well, it's a 1 year
Okay.
role, and that's a deliberate choice
Yeah.
because um, we have a paid professional staff, but the idea of having the chair as the leader is to ensure that that person really is still in touch with members
Yeah.
and engaged with the needs of members.
But how much influence can you have in say, determining the direction of your association if it's just going to be 1 year?
Yeah,
It almost sounds
this
like an
is
honorary
always
role.
yeah, yes, this is the where I think the intersection of the person and the role comes together. I've had the opportunity over the last few years to be on the executive committee. And because I had a clear idea of what I felt would enable the association to be more effective in Canada, I joined the committee with that purpose. And I also felt that a lot of those benefits that I felt would be particular to Canadians were going to be of wider benefit to all members in terms of better listening, closer engagement, more interaction between the North American headquarters and the local chapter. Um, so really, I would say that being the chair is almost the capstone of that process. It's been a multi-year process, and now I sort of have the chance to stand at the front and say, this is what I've been trying to build up to for years.
Good.
And I think that's the great chance of being the chairperson.
Okay. So, what's your prediction on your legacy? Are you going to achieve what everything you've set out to do?
Well, I was really delighted a week or two ago. We had a board meeting of our corporate board that's about 100 people, and we were talking about a topic that had the potential to be contentious. And afterwards, I received a number of messages and encouragement from board members saying that they were so pleased that I'd led the meeting in a way that they felt was transparent and where they felt included. And if that and no other outcome was my legacy for the year, I would be absolutely delighted because I think that's just so crucial. People need to feel part of what they're doing and they need to feel that they have a voice to speak up. And I hope that that paradigm and model of leadership is one that we continue to build and strengthen.
Great. Hey, Alex, you've been talking about commercial real estate, what it actually is all about. Well,
Hmm.
you've been to university, to college to get a degree in this. But if young people out there are now curious and interested to know more about commercial real estate and what they could do, what would your advice be? Where do they start and what could they best do?
Hmm. I would say, depending on the market, that they're probably, particularly in Europe and in some of the major Asian nations, there are well-developed, National University of Singapore, as an example, has a very strong commercial real estate program. And so you may be in a market where something like that exists. Um, Also, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Fritz, that going into anything, if you can find somebody that's a little bit of a gatekeeper or a friend in that,
Yeah.
an ally, uh, try to sit down with them. You mentioned you live in a small town. I grew up in a small village. I don't know that I would have known where to start, but I did manage to stumble across this university program. And of course, I would say associations and trade groups are an excellent way to begin. NAIOP, NAIOP.org is the association website. We're North American based, so for the North American audience, that's a good place to begin as well. A lot of major US cities have a chapter, several large Canadian cities do. And associations are a good way to begin because you get a bit of an idea of the breadth of the association, pardon me, of the industry. And most association members have chosen to get involved because they're excited about it and they want to see better things occur in the industry.
So always good advice is go where the people are already gathering, where the node is, and
Yes,
then
exactly.
talk to these people. Just listen, observe what they have to tell.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Most people that have chosen to join an association, in my opinion, it did that because they're a believer in it and they're excited to talk about what they're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be volunteering their time and paying extra dues. So it's a good chance to start there.
Good. That's good advice, Alex. Hey, as predicted, time has moved very fast today in this interview. Alex, I want to thank you so much for talking with the brand called you, sharing your insights and experience in commercial real estate. No doubt you've inspired listeners to have a look at this industry for themselves. So thank
I
you so
hope
much.
so. Thank you for hosting, Fritz. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.